They Finally Found Us, Part 1. The Signal.
Hello friends, thanks for your interest in this video. Let me know where you're from, and also don't forget to like the video and also subscribe to the channel.
The night sky over the high desert stretched out like black velvet scattered with diamond dust. Each pinpoint of light a distant sun that had witnessed eons of cosmic silence. Dr. Mara Vance didn't care much for poetry these days, but tonight, hunched over her array of glowing screens in the cramped observatory, perched on a lonely Nevada hilltop, she couldn't help thinking the universe looked like it was holding its breath. Around her, the world was quiet. Too damn quiet, if she was being honest. The kind of silence that made your ears ring and your thoughts get lousy and jumbled. But Mara wasn't here for peace and quiet. She was here hunting for the one thing that had eluded humanity since it first looked up at the stars and wondered. Proof that we weren't alone. For 6 hours straight, she'd been sifting through cosmic noise, the random pulses and static that filled the void between stars, the background hum of a universe that mostly didn't give a damn about Earth or anyone on it. Her coffee had gone cold 3 times. Her back ached something fierce, and her graduate student, Tommy Chen, had bailed 2 hours ago, muttering something about needing actual sleep like a normal human being. Quitter, Mara had called after him, but she'd smiled when she said it. Now alone in the observatory with only the soft whir of computers and the occasional creak of the building settling, Mara felt that familiar itch, the one that had driven her through 2 PhDs and a decade of professional ridicule. The itch that said tonight was different. And then the signal hit. It cracked through her data stream like a firefighter's siren blaring in a funeral home. Sudden, impossible, and absolutely completely wrong for what should have been empty space. Mara's hand froze halfway to her coffee mug. Her eyes locked onto the waveform pattern dancing across her primary monitor. "No way," she whispered. "No freaking way." Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up analysis programs she'd written herself, running pattern recognition algorithms that had taken months to perfect. The signal crystallized, resolved, became something she recognized with a jolt of disbelief that nearly knocked her out of her chair. The Golden Record. Voyager's calling card, humanity's message in a bottle flung into the cosmic ocean back in 1977. The signal was a response, a fractured echo of that long-ago greeting, bouncing back through space like a boomerang nobody expected to see again. But it wasn't just a repeat. It was transformed, enhanced, wrapped in layers of data that made Mara's head spin. Whoever, whatever, had found Voyager hadn't just listened. They'd answered. And they were telling humanity exactly where they'd found it. Her hands trembled as she adjusted frequencies, trying to clear the static fuzz that clung to the edges of the transmission. Slowly, like a photograph developing in a darkroom, the message resolved into something impossible. Coordinates. Precise, mathematical, unmistakable. And they pointed right here to Earth, a blue marble spinning through the void, addressed in the language of the stars by someone who now knew exactly where to find it. Mara sat frozen, her mind racing through possibilities like a runaway train. This was it. This was the moment every SETI researcher had dreamed about for decades. First contact, proof, validation, everything, and then the lights went out, not just in the observatory, everywhere. Through the window, Mara watched as the distant glow of Las Vegas, usually visible as a dome of light pollution on the horizon, flickered and died. Her screens went black. The computers whined down into silence. For 5 heartbeats, the world held its breath in perfect darkness. Then everything surged back to life. Lights blazed. Computers rebooted with cheerful chimes. And across every continent, every city, every power grid on the planet, the same thing happened in perfect, impossible synchronization. A hiccup, a glitch, a cosmic wink that said, "We're here and we can touch you." Mara's phone exploded with notifications, texts, calls, alerts from colleagues around the world, all asking the same frantic question. Did you see that? Did you feel it? What the hell just happened? But Mara wasn't looking at her phone. She was staring at her screen where the message had changed. New text scrolled across her display in clean, simple English that somehow felt more terrifying than any alien language could have been. Humanity, remain calm. You have been located. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a promise. It was a statement of fact. delivered with the calm certainty of someone checking an item off a very long list. Mara's voice cracked when she finally spoke, the words tumbling out to the empty room. They're not invading. They're coming home. And outside, in the vast darkness above the atmosphere, 3 enormous shapes began their slow, inexorable approach to Earth. The world's response to first contact was chaos wrapped in a thin veneer of forced calm, like a pressure cooker with a smile painted on the lid. Within 20 minutes of the power surge, every major government knew something had happened. Within an hour, intelligence agencies were comparing notes, trying to figure out if it was an attack, a glitch, or something worse. Within 3 hours, someone leaked Mara's initial findings to a reporter at the Washington Post, and the dam broke completely. Social media exploded. Conspiracy theorists who'd been shouting about aliens for years suddenly found themselves vindicated and terrified in equal measure. Religious leaders issued conflicting statements, some calling it the end times, others preaching calm and welcoming our cosmic neighbors with open arms. The stock market went into freefall, then surged, then crashed again as nobody could figure out what aliens meant for quarterly earnings. In Washington, the president convened an emergency session with military leaders and scientific advisors. Mara got the call at 4:37 a.m., right as she was trying to catch a few hours of sleep on the observatory's ratty couch. Dr. Vance, the voice on the other end, was crisp, official, and deeply concerned. "This is General Marcus Webb, Joint Chiefs. We need you in Washington ASAP. A plane's already on its way to pick you up." Mara rubbed her eyes, her brain still foggy with exhaustion. "General, I'm just a radio astronomer. I look at signals." "I'm not—" "You're the one who caught it first," Webb interrupted. "You're the one who knows the data. And right now you're the closest thing we have to an expert on whatever the hell is heading our way. The plane lands in 45 minutes. Be ready." The line went dead. Mara stared at her phone, then at the ceiling, then let out a long, shaky breath. "Well, shit," she said to nobody in particular. "Guess I'm going to Washington." The flight east was a blur of military efficiency and barely controlled panic. Mara spent most of it reviewing the data she'd managed to download before leaving, trying to make sense of patterns that seemed to shift every time she thought she had a handle on them. The signal wasn't just a message, it was alive, adaptive, responding to analysis like it knew it was being watched. Creepy didn't begin to cover it. By the time they landed at Andrews Air Force Base, the sun was coming up, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that felt obscenely normal given the circumstances. A black SUV waited on the tarmac, engine running, and Mara barely had time to grab her bag before she was whisked away to a facility she'd never heard of. Buried somewhere beneath the Pentagon, the briefing room was packed. Military brass, NASA officials, representatives from a dozen intelligence agencies, and a handful of scientists Mara recognized from conferences, all looking like they'd slept about as well as she had. Which was to say, not at all. General Webb stood at the front, a wall of monitors behind him displaying satellite imagery that made Mara's stomach drop. 3 massive objects, each one easily a mile long, hung in perfect formation just beyond the moon's orbit. They'd appeared 6 hours ago, slipping out of nowhere like sharks rising from deep water. "Ladies and gentlemen," Webb began, his voice carrying the weight of a man who'd seen too much history in the making. "We are officially no longer alone in the universe. These craft appeared at 0347 Zulu time, arranged in a triangular formation with mathematical precision. They've made no hostile moves. They've made no communication beyond the initial message Dr. Vance received. They're just waiting." A woman Mara didn't recognize, CIA maybe or NSA, raised her hand. "Waiting for what?" Webb's expression was grim. "That's what we're here to figure out." For the next 3 hours, Mara and the other scientists presented everything they knew, which wasn't much. The ships were massive. They were technologically advanced beyond anything humanity could match. And they were clearly interested in Earth for reasons nobody could pin down. "It's not an invasion," Mara said during her presentation, pulling up the linguistic analysis she'd done on the initial message. "The phrasing is all wrong for that. 'You have been located' isn't a threat. It's clinical, like they've been searching for something and finally found it." "Searching for what?" someone asked. Mara shook her head. "That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?" The answer came sooner than anyone expected, And it came in the form of movement. 18 hours after the ships first appeared, one of them detached from the formation. Satellites tracked its descent, a slow, controlled drop from lunar orbit to low Earth orbit to atmosphere. It moved with eerie grace, like a dancer who'd rehearsed this routine 1,000 times. Its destination, the Nevada desert, not far from where Mara had first detected the signal. The military scrambled response teams. Fighter jets screamed overhead, useless against technology they couldn't hope to match, but present anyway, just in case. News helicopters circled at a distance, broadcasting every second to a global audience that had collectively called in sick to work. Mara watched it all unfold from a command center deep underground, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was it. First contact, happening in real time, and she had a front-row seat to humanity's next chapter. The ship settled onto the desert floor with barely a whisper, its surface rippling like liquid mercury. For a long moment, nothing happened. Military units formed a perimeter, weapons trained on the massive craft. Everyone waiting for something, and then the ship opened. Not with doors or hatches, it just sort of folded, reality bending around it like water flowing around a stone. And from the opening stepped a figure that made everyone in the command center suck in a collective breath. She was humanoid, roughly the same height and proportions as a tall woman. But that's where the similarity ended. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, shot through with veins that pulsed with silver light, like rivers of starfire frozen in flesh. Her eyes glowed with a soft golden luminescence, and when she moved, it was with a fluid grace that seemed to ignore little things like gravity and inertia. Jesus Christ, someone whispered behind Mara. The alien, the emissary, as they'd start calling her, stood motionless in the desert sun, seemingly unbothered by the heat that was already shimmering off the sand. And then she did something that made everyone's blood run cold. She looked directly at the nearest camera, and she smiled, not a threatening smile, not a friendly smile. Just a smile that said, "I see you. I know you're watching. Let's talk." Words bloomed in Mara's mind, not spoken aloud, not transmitted through any device, but simply appearing in her consciousness like they'd always been there. "You are not what we expected." Around the command center, people grabbed their heads, stumbling. The message had gone to everyone, every soldier, every scientist, every person watching through a screen. Telepathy, mind-to-mind communication. Impossible, except it was happening. "They're not all coming in peace," the emissary's voice continued, and this time there was urgency in it. Her gaze shifted skyward, toward the two ships still in orbit. On the satellite feeds, new contacts were appearing. More ships, different designs, aggressive postures. The formation was breaking apart as vessels that had been hidden behind the initial three revealed themselves. Dozens of them, all maneuvering for position. General Webb's face went pale. "Are we under attack?" But Mara was shaking her head, pieces clicking together in her mind. "No," she said slowly. "We're in the middle of someone else's war." Part 2, Factions. The world changed overnight, but not in the way anyone expected. The emissary, whom the media quickly dubbed Silver, for lack of any name she'd shared, remained in the Nevada desert, surrounded by military units that oscillated between treating her as a dignitary and a prisoner. She didn't seem bothered by either approach. Mostly she just stood there, watching the sky with those unsettling golden eyes, occasionally tilting her head like she was listening to music nobody else could hear. Mara arrived at the site 2 days after the landing, flown in on another military transport, because apparently she was now humanity's unofficial alien liaison. The desert heat hit her like a physical wall when she stepped off the plane, making her immediately regret every life choice that had led to this moment. "Dr. Vance." General Webb greeted her with a handshake that was just a bit too tight. "She's been asking for you." Mara's stomach did a little flip. "Asking how?" "She hasn't spoken out loud since she landed." Webb's expression was sour. "Trust me, when she wants you to know something, you know. Come on." They'd set up a command post about a quarter-mile from where Silver stood, a cluster of tents and mobile units that looked absurdly makeshift compared to the alien ship looming in the background. As Mara approached, she felt a gentle pressure in her mind, like someone knocking politely on a door. "May I speak with you directly?" The voice, Silver's voice, was neither male nor female, young nor old. It simply was. carrying with it a sense of age and weariness that made Mara's 38 years feel like a blink. "Yeah," Mara said aloud, feeling stupid talking to empty air. "Yeah, we can talk." The pressure increased, and suddenly Mara wasn't standing in the desert anymore. She was somewhere else, a space that was both physical and not, where Silver stood before her looking somehow more real than anything around them. "A mental construct," Silver explained, gesturing to the shifting space around them. "Easier than shouting across the sand. You humans are remarkably resistant to telepathy, all that neural noise, but you can manage this with some help." Mara forced herself to focus, pushing down the panic that wanted to claw its way up her throat. Okay, I can handle this. What do you want to tell me?" Silver's expression softened. "First, an apology. I have brought war to your doorstep. That was never the intention." "We?" Mara asked. "Who's we?" "The remnant. My people." Silver waved a hand, and the space around them filled with images, ships, worlds, beings that looked similar to her, but different in subtle ways. "We are what remains of the architects, the species that seeded life across this arm of the galaxy, over 3 million of your years ago. We sent Voyager's golden record back as a beacon because we recognized the genetic signature embedded in your broadcasts. You are our children, Dr. Vance. Distant cousins, perhaps, but family nonetheless." Mara's brain felt like it was short-circuiting. You made us." "Not directly. The architects seeded thousands of worlds with the building blocks of life, then stepped back to see what would evolve. Earth was one such world. We left you markers buried deep in your genetic code just in case—" Silver's voice trailed off. "Just in case what?" "Just in case we needed to come back." Silver's eyes flashed with something that might have been pain. "But we are not the only ones who remember Earth. The others, the collective, the unity, the hierarchs, they remember too. And they have different ideas about what should be done with a species that carries architect DNA." The mental construct shattered, dumping Mara back into the desert with a gasp that had General Webb reaching for her arm. "What happened? What did she tell you?" Mara stared at the silver figure standing in the distance, then at the sky where more ships continued to arrive every hour. "We're not just first contact," she said hoarsely. "We're a reunion, and not everyone's happy about it." Over the next week, the situation got exponentially more complicated. More factions arrived. The collective, cold, logical beings who looked like geometric shapes given flesh, argued that humanity was too primitive, too dangerous, too likely to misuse architect genetics. They wanted Earth quarantined, possibly sterilized. The Unity, a hive mind spread across thousands of small ships, saw humanity as a resource, raw genetic material that could be harvested and integrated into their collective consciousness. They were polite about it, but the underlying message was clear. Resistance would be futile. The hierarchs didn't even bother making contact. They just took up positions around Earth's orbit and started what could only be described as a blockade, preventing any faction from acting without their approval. And through it all, Silver remained in the desert, a lonely sentinel watching the gathering storm. Mara spent her days shuttling between meetings with world leaders, scientific sessions trying to understand the technology on display, and increasingly frequent mental conversations with Silver. The alien had become, if not a friend, then at least an ally, the only one willing to explain the cosmic mess humanity had stumbled into. "Why now?" Mara asked during one of their mental meetings, this one taking place in what looked like a library made of stars. "Why did you wait until we found Voyager? Why not make contact centuries ago?" Silver's avatar settled into a chair that materialized beneath her. "The Accords. After the Architect War, a conflict that nearly shattered this galaxy, the surviving factions agreed to let seeded worlds develop without interference. Voyager's golden record, leaving your solar system, was considered an open invitation. You reached out so we could reach back." "The Architect War," Mara repeated. "What was that about?" "Power, control. The usual stupidities that drive intelligent beings to destroy each other." Silver's expression turned bitter. "The architects created a weapon, you see, a fail-safe, in case their children turned against them. They called it the Continuity, a device capable of rewriting reality itself at the quantum level. It could end civilizations with a thought. When the war came, the architects hid it, scattered the keys across their seeded worlds, and then vanished. No one knows if they died or transcended or simply left. But the continuity remained, and every faction has been searching for it ever since. Mara's mouth went dry. And Earth. Earth is one of the key worlds. Somewhere on your planet, buried in your genetic code or hidden in your geology, is a piece of the continuity. That's why we're all here, Dr. Vance, not to study you, not to uplift you. To find the weapon before someone else does. The mental construct dissolved, and Mara found herself back in her tent, shaking with the implications. She grabbed her laptop, fingers flying over the keys as she started pulling together every piece of data she could find. Genetic, anomalies in human DNA, ancient megalithic, structures that shouldn't exist, given the technology of their time, unexplained archaeological findings that mainstream science dismissed as hoaxes. All of it started to form a pattern, a picture of something vast and ancient sleeping beneath humanity's feet. Tommy Chen, her graduate student who'd been dragged into this mess alongside her, stuck his head into the tent. "Dr. V, you okay?" "You look like you've seen a ghost." Mara looked up, her face pale. "Not a ghost, a bomb. Tommy, we need to run a full genetic scan on human DNA, looking for artificially inserted sequences. And we need to do it yesterday." "Why?" "What's going on?" "Because," Mara said grimly, "I think we've been carrying a weapon inside us this whole time. And if I'm right, every alien up there knows it." Part 3. The hidden code. The lab they set up in the bowels of Cheyenne Mountain was cramped, crowded, and running on equipment that was simultaneously cutting-edge and jury-rigged from whatever they could scrounge. Mara had assembled a team of geneticists, biologists, and cryptographers, anyone who could help decode what she was increasingly certain was hidden in human DNA. Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to Tommy, despite the shared last name, was a geneticist from MIT with a talent for finding patterns in chaos. She'd been skeptical when Mara first approached her with the theory that human DNA contained artificial code, but 3 days of analysis had turned that skepticism into wide-eyed fascination. "It's beautiful," Sarah breathed, staring at the sequence displayed across multiple monitors. "I mean terrifying but beautiful. Look at this." She highlighted a section of what most geneticists called junk DNA, the 98% of the human genome that didn't code for proteins and was assumed to be evolutionary leftovers. Except this section wasn't random. It was structured, mathematical, deliberate. "It's a key," Mara said, recognizing the pattern from the architect data Silver had shared. "Or part of one. How common is this sequence?" "That's the wild part," Sarah replied, pulling up population data. "It's in everyone. Every human who's ever been DNA tested carries this sequence with minor variations. It's not recessive or dominant, it's foundational. Whoever put it there made sure it would spread through the entire species." Tommy looked up from his station, where he'd been running comparative analysis. "I've got something else. This sequence, it's not static. It's reacting to something." "Reacting how?" Mara moved to his screen. "It started about 6 hours ago, right around when that new collective ship entered high orbit. The sequence is activating like it's waking up." Tommy's voice cracked slightly. "Dr. V, what happens when it fully activates?" Nobody had an answer for that. The answer came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, when every human on Earth simultaneously felt something shift inside their minds. It wasn't painful, more like the feeling of remembering something you'd forgotten, that tip-of-the-tongue sensation of knowledge just out of reach. But it was universal, hitting every man, woman, and child on the planet at exactly the same moment. Social media exploded with reports. People described feeling connected, sensing the presence of billions of other minds like distant stars in a vast network. Some found it exhilarating, others were terrified, and a small percentage, about 1 in 10,000, experienced something more they remembered. Not their own memories, but something older. Fragments of knowledge that shouldn't exist. Images of cities that had never been built on Earth. Technologies that humanity hadn't invented. Languages that no human tongue could speak. Mara was one of them. She stood in the lab, frozen, as memories that weren't hers flooded through her consciousness. She saw the architects in their prime, beings of light and thought who'd shaped worlds like artists working with clay. She saw the weapon they'd created, a sphere of impossible geometry that hummed with the power to unmake reality. And she saw where they'd hidden it. "Oh no," she whispered. "Oh, no, 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 Mara." Sarah grabbed her arm. "What is it? What did you see?" But Mara was already moving, stumbling to her computer, pulling up geological surveys and oceanographic data. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, triangulating positions, confirming what the ancient memory had shown her. The continuity wasn't hidden in some remote location. It wasn't buried in a tomb or locked in a vault. It was beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a trench deeper than Everest was tall, inside a structure that had been there for 3 million years, waiting. And humanity's genetic awakening had just sent a signal that every faction in orbit could detect, telling them exactly where to look. "We need to contact Silver," Mara said urgently. "We need to—" The lights went out, not just in the lab, everywhere. The backup generators kicked in after a second, bathing the room in red emergency lighting. But the computers were dead. The network was down. And through the reinforced walls, Mara could hear alarms blaring throughout the facility. "What's happening?" Tommy asked, his voice thin with fear. Mara's communicator crackled to life with General Webb's voice, tight with barely controlled panic. "All personnel, code black. We have multiple hostile contacts entering the atmosphere. This is not a drill. We are under attack." The assault on Earth began with precision that spoke of careful planning. The collective struck first, their geometric ships unleashing beams of energy that carved through mountain ranges, targeting the tectonic weak points that would trigger massive earthquakes. They weren't trying to conquer Earth. They were trying to destroy it, to bury the continuity under so much geological chaos that no one could ever retrieve it. The Unity responded by deploying harvest ships, massive vessels that descended on population centers and began abducting humans by the thousands. If the planet was going to be destroyed anyway, they reasoned, they might as well save the genetic material they came for. And the hierarchs simply watched, their blockade tightening, ensuring that no one could escape the slaughter they'd tacitly approved. Through it all, Silver's remnant fought a desperate defensive action. Their ships outgunned and outnumbered, but unwilling to let humanity fall without a fight. Mara watched it all unfold on the emergency screens in the command center, feeling helpless and furious in equal measure. This was her fault, she thought irrationally. She'd decoded the signal. She'd activated the genetic memory. She'd pointed every hostile faction in the galaxy directly at Earth's most vulnerable spot. "We have to stop them," she said, grabbing Webb's arm. "We have to get to the continuity before they do." Webb looked at her like she'd suggested they sprout wings and fly. "Dr. Vance, we're fighting for survival here. We don't have the resources to—" "Then we make resources," Mara shouted. "General, that weapon down there is the only thing that might let us survive this. The architects built it as a failsafe, right? Well, we're their descendants. Maybe we can use it? Maybe?" Webb's voice dripped with skepticism. "You want to bet Earth's survival on maybe? You got a better idea?" For a long moment, Webb just stared at her. Then he grabbed a phone, barking orders that set a dozen impossible plans into motion. "You've got 12 hours, he told Mara. "That's how long our analysts think we can hold out before the collective breaks through our defenses. If you're going to save the world, Dr. Vance, you better do it fast." Mara was already running for the door. "I'll need a submarine, a deep dive team, and every piece of architect technology Silver can spare." "You're insane," Webb called after her. "Yeah," Mara shouted back. "But I'm your kind of insane." Part 4. The Descent. The submarine was Russian originally, borrowed through a diplomatic channel that Mara suspected involved threats as much as favors. It was nuclear-powered, capable of diving to depths that would crush most vessels, and currently being retrofitted with technology that looked like it had been torn directly from a science fiction movie. Silver had provided it, remnant hardware that could interface with human systems, creating a hybrid vessel that just might survive the journey to the bottom of the Mariana Trench and beyond. "This is crazy," Tommy said for the 15th time as he checked the retrofit seals. He'd insisted on coming despite Mara's protests. "We're going to die down there." "Probably," Mara agreed cheerfully, her exhaustion turning into a kind of manic energy. "But we're going to die up here if we don't try. So pick your poison." The dive team consisted of 5 people: Mara, Tommy, a Navy SEAL named Marcus, who looked like he could bench press a car, and 2 of Silver's people, remnant warriors who'd volunteered to guide them through whatever waited below. One of them, A male with silver veins that pulsed in complex patterns, introduced himself as Corvus. "The continuity is not merely a weapon," he explained as they made final preparations. "It is a living system, designed to recognize architect descendants. Your genetic activation should grant you access, Dr. Vance, but be warned, the weapon was built to judge. It will test you." "Test me how?" Mara asked. Corvus's expression was grim. "That is between you and it." Great, Mara thought. Cryptic alien warnings. Just what I needed. Above them, the war continued to rage. Human forces, bolstered by Silver's remnant and a few unexpected allies from neutral factions, were managing to hold the line, barely. But everyone knew it was temporary. The collective had numbers. The unity had resilience. And the hierarchs had patience. Time was the enemy, and they were running out of it fast. The submarine descended at 8:15 p.m. local time, slipping beneath the waves of the Pacific like a stone dropping into infinity. The water changed from blue to black, to a darkness so complete it felt like diving into the void itself. Mara watched the depth gauge with growing anxiety. They were already past the point where sunlight could penetrate, past the point where most life existed, heading into an alien world that was somehow still on Earth. "Depth, 3,000 meters, Marcus announced. "Hull integrity holding. Pressure steady." They fell deeper. At 5,000 meters, the remnant technology started to glow, silver patterns spreading across the submarine's interior like bioluminescent algae. The light was gentle, almost comforting, but it made the darkness outside seem even more absolute. "We're approaching the coordinates," Corvus said, his voice calm despite the pressure that would have turned a normal submarine into a crushed can. "Prepare for visual contact." And there it was. At first, Mara thought it was a trick of the light, her exhausted brain conjuring shapes from nothing. But as they drew closer, the structure resolved into something impossible, a complex of buildings that looked like they'd been grown rather than built. Their surfaces covered in the same silver veins that marked the remnant. But these structures were old, ancient. The veins were dim, barely glowing, like embers of a fire that had burned for 3 million years and was finally guttering out. "The first archive," Corvus breathed. "We thought they were all destroyed. What is this place?" Mara asked, unable to tear her eyes away from the ghostly city sprawling across the ocean floor. "A seed vault. A library. A tomb." The remnant warrior's voice was thick with emotion. "The architects built these across the galaxy, storing knowledge and genetic samples from every species they seeded. If this one survived..." He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. Mara understood. This wasn't just about the continuity anymore. This was about preserving something ancient and irreplaceable. The submarine touched down on a landing platform that shouldn't have been able to support them, but did anyway. Architect technology recognizing its descendants and responding. The airlock opened onto a chamber flooded with water, but breathing water that somehow provided oxygen. "Nanoscale life support," Corvus explained, seeing Mara's shocked expression. The architects didn't believe in barriers between life and environment. They adapted everything. They swam through corridors that glowed with increasing intensity, the archive waking up around them like a sleeping dragon opening its eyes. Symbols appeared on the walls, not writing exactly, but concepts that burned directly into Mara's brain. "Welcome, inheritor. You have been expected." "Expected," Mara said aloud, her voice strange in the liquid environment. "How?" "Because you carry the key. Because you remember. Because the time of judgment has come." They reached a central chamber where the water fell away, creating a bubble of air that shouldn't have been physically possible but existed anyway. In the center of the chamber, suspended in a field of force that made the air shimmer, was a sphere, the continuity. It was smaller than Mara had imagined, maybe 3 feet in diameter, its surface a complex pattern of geometric shapes that seemed to shift and change as she watched. It wasn't metal or crystal or anything she could identify. It simply was, existing in a state between matter and energy, and it was singing, not audibly. Mara's ears heard nothing but the gentle hum of the archive. But in her mind, in that newly awakened part of her consciousness that carried architect genetics, she heard music. Complex, mathematical, beautiful and terrifying. The song of creation and destruction perfectly balanced. "Mara," Tommy warned, "we've got incoming." The submarine's sensors were going crazy. Multiple contacts converging on their position, collective forces had detected the archive's awakening and were diving to intercept. How long? Mara asked. 10 minutes. Maybe less. Not enough time. Not nearly enough. Mara stepped forward, reaching for the continuity. Corvus grabbed her arm. Wait, the weapon judges. If it finds you unworthy, then we're all dead anyway, Mara said. Let me go. She touched the sphere and the universe exploded. Part 5. The test Mara wasn't in the archive anymore. She wasn't anywhere, really. Just consciousness floating in a space that was both infinite and impossibly small, where time moved in directions that didn't exist. Hello. Daughter of the architects, a voice said. Not Silver's voice. Not anything that had ever lived, but something older, vaster. Woven from the fabric of reality itself. Mara tried to speak, but she had no mouth. Tried to move, but she had no body. She was thought, pure consciousness, facing something that might have been a god. You are afraid, the voice observed. Good, fear means you understand the stakes. What are you? Mara managed to project, her thoughts clumsy and loud in this strange space. I am the continuity. I am the failsafe. I am the weapon your ancestors built when they realized their children might one day need protection from themselves. The presence shifted around her, and suddenly Mara could see, not with eyes, but with a perception that encompassed everything at once. She saw the architects in their glory, beings who'd mastered the fundamental forces of the universe. She saw them seeding worlds across the galaxy, each one a garden where life could grow and evolve. She saw the moment it all went wrong, when some of their creations, their children, turned on each other in wars that scarred the galaxy. And she saw the architect's choice, build a weapon so terrible that using it would be unconscionable, and hope that fear alone would keep the peace. The continuity, Mara whispered. You can rewrite reality. Yes, I can unmake civilizations. I can reset evolution. I can turn thriving worlds into sterile rocks, or dead rocks into gardens of Eden. I am omnipotence constrained by purpose to protect the architect's legacy from those who would abuse it. And now you're going to judge whether I'm worthy to use you. No, the voice sounded almost sad. I am going to judge whether your species deserves to survive. The space around Mara shifted, and suddenly she was standing in a corridor of her childhood home in Ohio. She recognized the faded wallpaper, the creaky floorboards, the way afternoon light slanted through the kitchen window. This is a memory, she said. This is a test, the continuity corrected. The first of 3. You must understand what you are before you can wield what I am. Mara heard voices from the kitchen. Her mother, angry and scared, arguing with someone. Her father? No, her father had died when Mara was 7. This was before that, when the family had still been whole, still been happy. She walked toward the voices, her feet carrying her forward despite her reluctance. In the kitchen, her younger self, maybe 6 years old, sat at the table quietly eating cereal while her parents' argument escalated. Can't keep doing this, her mother was saying. You work 80 hours a week, you're never here, and for what? So you can chase some dream that'll never happen. It's not a dream, her father replied, his voice tight with frustration. It's real. There's something out there, Sarah. I can prove it if you just give me time. Time? How much more time? How many more years do we put our lives on hold while you stare at stars? Young Mara kept eating her cereal, head down, pretending not to hear. But Mara now could see the way her small hands trembled, the way she flinched at every raised voice. Your father, the continuity said, was one of the first humans to detect the buried memories. He felt the genetic awakening beginning, decades before it reached critical mass. It drove him mad in the end. The knowledge that humanity wasn't alone, trapped inside a mind unprepared to receive it. Mara watched as the argument escalated, as her mother stormed out, as her father sat down at the table and pulled young Mara into his lap, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a crumbling world. Daddy, young Mara asked, are the stars really talking to you? Yeah, honey, her father said softly. They're talking, and someday someone's going to listen. The memory dissolved and Mara found herself crying, real tears in this unreal space. He killed himself 6 months after this, she said, drove his car off a bridge. The police said it was an accident, but I always knew better. He saw what was coming, the continuity confirmed. He tried to warn others, but no one believed. The isolation broke him. The question, daughter of the architects, is this. Knowing what you know, would you have wanted him to succeed? Would you have wanted humanity to learn the truth decades earlier, unprepared and frightened? Mara thought about it, really thought about it. No, she finally said. We weren't ready. Maybe we're still not ready. But ready or not, here we are. We don't get to choose the timing of first contact. We only get to choose how we respond. First test passed, the continuity said. You understand that readiness is not a prerequisite for necessity. Second test. The space shifted again. This time Mara stood on the deck of a burning ship. Fire licked up from below, smoke choked the air, and all around her people screamed and ran and died. What is this? She demanded. History, the continuity replied. The moment the architects realized they had created something terrible, the ship wasn't a human vessel. It was alien, massive, bristling with weapons that radiated power Mara couldn't comprehend. And it was locked in combat with another ship, equally matched, equally desperate. The architects' civil war, Mara realized. This is how it started. One faction believed their children should be allowed to develop freely. Another believed they needed guidance, control, shaping. The disagreement became a debate. The debate became a conflict. The conflict became genocide. Mara watched as the ship she stood on fired a weapon that simply erased the enemy vessel, not destroyed it, not blew it apart, but removed it from existence as if it had never been. And she felt the deaths of everyone aboard that ship. Their consciousness snuffed out in an instant. Billions of lives ended in the blink of an eye. This is what I was built to prevent, the continuity said. This level of destruction, this casual disregard for life in pursuit of ideological purity. But in stopping this, the architects had to create something even more terrible, me. The ultimate weapon, capable of doing to entire civilizations what that weapon did to a single ship. The scene shifted. Mara stood now in a vast chamber where the architects were gathered, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, their forms shifting and changing as they debated. We cannot use it, one argued. The moral price is too high. We cannot not use it, another countered. Without the threat of ultimate consequences, the war will never end. Then we hide it, a third suggested. We build fail-safes. We ensure that only our descendants, proven worthy through time and trial, can access it. We make the price of using the continuity so high that the mere existence of the option enforces peace. The architects voted. The measure passed by the slimmest of margins. And the weapon was hidden, scattered across a dozen worlds, its keys buried in the genetic code of every species the architects had seeded. They made us the guardians, Mara whispered. All of us. Every seeded species carries a piece of the puzzle. Yes, and now those species have found each other. Have found you, and the question must be asked again. Is the existence of ultimate power a deterrent, or an invitation to use it? I don't know, Mara admitted. I honest to God don't know. All I know is that the collective is about to destroy Earth. The unity wants to harvest us like crops, and the hierarchs are content to let it happen. If I don't use you, we die. If I do use you, I become the same kind of monster the architects were trying to stop. Second test passed, the continuity said, and Mara felt its approval like warm sunlight. You understand that power corrupts, and that sometimes the only moral choice is between different degrees of corruption. Third test. Wait, I passed? I didn't answer. You gave the only honest answer. That is what I needed to hear. Third test. The space shifted one final time. Mara stood on Earth, but an Earth transformed beyond recognition. Cities stretched to the horizon, built from materials that glowed with inner light. The sky was filled with ships, not warships, but vessels of exploration and trade. And walking the streets were dozens of different species, human and alien mingling freely, working together, living together. What is this? Mara asked. A possibility, the continuity replied. The future that could be if you use me wisely. I can end the threat facing Earth. I can force the factions to recognize humanity as equals. I can give your species the time and space it needs to grow into its potential. It was beautiful. It was everything Mara had ever dreamed first contact could be. Peaceful, cooperative, advancing toward a future where the divisions between species mattered less than the shared goal of understanding the universe. But, she said, because there had to be a but it comes at a cost, the continuity confirmed. The scene shifted. Now Mara stood on a dead world, grey, barren, lifeless. This was the collective's homeworld. To end their threat, I would need to make an example. I would need to show that attacking Earth means total annihilation, not just for the attackers, but for everything they love, everyone they care about. Mara felt sick. You'd commit genocide. I would enforce the lesson the architects learned too late, that some actions have consequences beyond calculation. The collective has 17 core worlds, 300 billion citizens. I would need to destroy perhaps 3 of those worlds, 90 billion lives, to make the others understand that Earth is not to be touched. That's evil. That is deterrence, the continuity said flatly. That is the price of survival. The architects built me to be a weapon, and weapons do not work by asking nicely. They work by being so terrible that the mere threat of their use prevents conflict. The scene shifted again, showing Mara different possibilities. Worlds where humanity became conquerors, using the continuity to dominate other species. Worlds where humanity was destroyed because they refused to use it. Worlds where the weapon was used once, twice, a dozen times, until the galaxy was so scarred by its power that nothing remained but ruins. Every choice leads to horror, Mara said, her voice breaking. Every path ends in blood. Yes, the continuity agreed. That is the burden of power. That is what the architects understood too late, that by creating me they ensured that someone someday would face this exact choice. Use me and become a monster. Refuse me and watch innocents die. There is no clean answer. Mara wanted to scream. She wanted to rage against the unfairness of it all. She was just a scientist. Just a woman who'd looked at the stars and wondered what was out there. She wasn't equipped for this. She wasn't ready to play God, but ready or not, here she was. If I refuse you, she asked quietly, what happens? The collective destroys Earth. The unity harvests what genetic material they can from the survivors. Humanity becomes a footnote in galactic history, another failed species that couldn't adapt fast enough. And I remain hidden, waiting for the next inheritor, the next crisis, the next impossible choice. And if I use you, you save Earth. You elevate humanity to a position of power in the galactic community. And you live with the knowledge that you built that power on a foundation of mass murder. The continuity's presence pressed close around her. This is the third test, daughter of the architects. Not whether you will use me, but whether you can accept the consequences of that use. Can you carry that weight? Mara thought about her father, driven mad by knowledge he couldn't share. She thought about Tommy, about Sarah, about all the humans scrambling to survive above while she floated in this impossible space. She thought about the billions of collective citizens who'd done nothing wrong, except be born into a society that viewed humans as primitives. And she thought about the alternative, watching Earth burn, watching her species die, all because she wasn't willing to make the hard call. I hate this, she said finally. I hate every part of this. But yeah, I can carry it. Someone has to, right? Might as well be me. For a long moment, the continuity was silent. Then, third test passed. You understand that moral clarity is a luxury, and that sometimes survival requires accepting eternal damnation. You are worthy, Mara Vance. The question is, what will you do with that worthiness? I want to try something different, Mara said slowly, an idea forming. The architects used you as a threat, right? As a deterrent? Yes, but they never actually used you. The war ended because they threatened to, not because they followed through, correct? So maybe I don't have to destroy those worlds. Maybe I just have to make everyone think I will. Can you do that? Can you make a demonstration powerful enough to scare the hell out of every faction in orbit without actually killing billions? The continuity considered this. It would be down unprecedented, but yes, I can manifest my power in ways that demonstrate capability without exercising full lethality. However, understand, if the bluff is called, if someone tests whether you're willing to follow through, you will need to make good on the threat. Otherwise, the deterrent fails. I know, Mara said, I know, but maybe, just maybe, we can buy enough time for cooler heads to prevail. Maybe we can show them that Earth is worth more as an ally than as a crater. Or maybe, the continuity said, you will simply delay the inevitable. But that choice is yours to make. Take me, daughter of the architects, wield me, and pray that your gamble succeeds. The strange space collapsed, and Mara slammed back into her body with a gasp that sent water flooding into her lungs. Except it wasn't drowning. The nanoscale life support adjusted, and she was breathing again. Coughing and shaking but alive. The continuity was in her hands, warm and heavy and thrumming with impossible power. And in her mind she could feel it, the weapon's consciousness ancient and vast waiting for her command. "Mara!" Tommy grabbed her shoulders. "Thank God. You've been standing there for 5 minutes. We thought you were—" "No time," Mara gasped. "We've got company." The archive's walls shuddered as something massive impacted above them. The collective had arrived. Part 6, the demonstration. The submarine's return journey should have been impossible. They were being pursued by collective forces that could dive deeper and move faster than any human technology should have been able to match. But with the continuity in Mara's hands, pulsing with power that made the water around them glow, impossible became merely difficult. "Hostile vessels closing," Marcus reported, his voice tight but controlled. 3 minutes to intercept. Mara held the sphere, feeling its power thrumming through her like electricity. "Continuity," she said aloud, not caring that everyone could hear. "I need you to do something for me. I await your command, Inheritor. First, get us to the surface alive. Second, when we breach, I want you to show them. Show every ship, every faction, every being in orbit exactly what you're capable of. Make them believe. This will require significant energy expenditure. The archive will deplete its reserves. Do it." The submarine lurched forward with impossible speed, the remnant technology enhancing beyond its design specifications. Behind them, Mara felt more than saw the collective ships trying to keep pace. Their weapons charging. Then they hit the surface, bursting from the ocean like a breaching whale, and Mara released the continuity's power. The sky lit up. Not with explosions or weapons fire, with pure, radiant energy that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Every ship in orbit, collective, unity, hierarchs, remnant, suddenly found their systems responding to something they couldn't understand or control. And then, in the space between one heartbeat and the next, something impossible happened. The moon disappeared, not destroyed. Mara had been very specific about that, just moved, relocated to a different orbit, one that placed it precisely between Earth and the gathered fleets. A shield that shouldn't exist, but did. Every sensor on every ship screamed in alarm. The moon's mass hadn't changed. Its gravitational influence remained. But it was somewhere it absolutely hadn't been a second ago. Moved across hundreds of thousands of miles in an instant by power that made their weapons look like children's toys. "First demonstration complete," the continuity reported. "Shall I proceed with second demonstration?" "Not yet," Mara said, watching the feeds from the submarine's communications array as every faction in orbit simultaneously lost their minds. "Let them think about what just happened. Let them imagine what else we could do." On the command channel, General Webb's voice crackled through. "Vance, what the hell did you just do? We're getting distress signals from every ship up there. They think you're about to destroy the planet." "Not destroy," Mara replied calmly, though her hands were shaking. "Demonstrate. Patch me through to all channels. I want to address everyone." There was a pause then. "You're live." Mara took a deep breath. This was it. The moment that would either save humanity or doom it. "No pressure. This is Dr. Mara Vance of Earth speaking to all gathered factions. What you just witnessed was a minor demonstration of the continuity's power, the weapon system developed by the architects and hidden on our world. We have located it. We have activated it. And we are prepared to use it if necessary." She paused, letting that sink in. "But here's the thing, we don't want to. We're not conquerors. We're not killers. We're just a species trying to survive in a galaxy that seems determined to destroy us for crimes we didn't commit. So here's what's going to happen." Mara pulled up the coordinates the continuity had provided, transmitting them across all channels. "These are the locations of 11 other archive sites scattered across this sector. Each one contains knowledge, technology, and genetic samples from the architect's civilization. We're willing to share access to these archives with any faction that agrees to withdraw from Earth immediately and enter into peaceful negotiations." "You're serious," someone said over the channel. AI. "Collective Commander," voice tight with disbelief. "You'd trade architect secrets for peace?" "In a heartbeat," Mara replied, "because that's what the architects wanted. They didn't build the continuity to destroy. They built it to protect, to give their descendants a chance to survive long enough to mature, to grow, to maybe become something better than they were. She looked at the sphere in her hands, feeling its vast consciousness watching, waiting, but make no mistake. If you force our hand, we will use the continuity. And what you saw with the moon, that's child's play compared to what this thing can really do. So the question you all need to ask yourselves is, do you want to fight the inheritors of the architect legacy, or do you want to work with us? Silence on the channels. Long, tense, fragile silence that stretched until Mara thought her heart would explode from the pressure. Then Silver's voice cut through. The remnant accept. We will withdraw to high orbit and await negotiations. Another voice, Unity, their collective consciousness speaking as one. We find these terms acceptable. The Unity withdraws. One by one the factions announce their acceptance. Even the collective, bitter and resentful, agreed to pull back their forces. Only the hierarchs remained silent. Continuity, Mara said quietly. What are they doing? The hierarchs are deliberating. They consider humanity's possession of me to be a violation of the Accords. They believe the weapon should be secured by a neutral party, specifically themselves. Of course they do, Mara muttered. Then louder, Hierarchs, I know you can hear me. What's it going to be? The response came in a voice that sounded like grinding consonants. We demand that the continuity be surrendered to our custody. It is too dangerous for a primitive species to control. Mara felt anger flare in her chest. Primitive? We just negotiated a peace that none of you could manage. We offered to share knowledge instead of hoarding it. And you call us primitive? You have not proven you can be trusted with such power. And you have. Mara shot back. You sat in orbit and watched while the collective tried to destroy us. You did nothing while the Unity attempted to harvest our people. You're not peacekeepers. You're just another gang of bullies who can't stand the idea that someone else might have more power than you. The hierarchs are arming weapons, the continuity reported. They intend to take me by force. Then I guess we do this the hard way, Mara said. Continuity. Second demonstration. Target the hierarch flagship. Don't destroy it, but make damn sure they know we could. The sphere pulsed in her hands, and reality bent. The hierarch flagship, a massive construct that had hung in orbit for weeks, projecting invincibility, suddenly found itself somewhere else. Specifically, it found itself in the atmosphere above Antarctica, held aloft by forces it couldn't comprehend, being very slowly lowered toward the ice. Not dropped, not crashed, just relocated like a chess piece, moved by a patient player who wanted to make a point. The flagship is undamaged, the continuity reported. All crew alive and functional. They are, however, extremely alarmed. Good, Mara said coldly. Maybe alarmed will teach them some humility. Hierarchs, you want to try that again? Or are we going to have a reasonable conversation about the future? For a long moment, nothing. Then the grinding voice returned. And this time there was something new in it. Respect. We withdraw. We will join the negotiations. Mara let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Smart choice. All factions stand down. We'll begin formal talks in 48 hours at a neutral location. I'm thinking the remnant archive on coordinates I'll transmit shortly. Come ready to work together or don't come at all. She closed the channel and slumped against the submarine's hull, suddenly feeling every hour of lost sleep, every moment of stress, crashing down on her at once. Did we just win? Tommy asked, his voice small and disbelieving. We bought time, Mara corrected. Whether we won or not depends on what we do with that time. Part 7. The Aftermath. The neutral location Mara chose was perfect in its symbolism. An old abandoned oil rig in the North Sea, retrofitted with remnant technology to create a space where all factions could meet on equal ground. The rig floated above the waves like a steel lotus, surrounded by ships from a dozen different species, all maintaining a careful distance. The negotiations lasted 3 weeks. It was brutal work. Every faction had grievances, demands, historical grudges that went back millions of years. The collective wanted assurances that humanity wouldn't use the continuity aggressively. The Unity wanted genetic samples in exchange for their withdrawal. The hierarchs wanted a seat at the table in any new galactic order. And the remnant? The remnant just wanted to know they weren't alone anymore. Mara found herself thrust into a role she'd never trained for. Diplomat, mediator, representative of her entire species. She spent long days in conference rooms arguing over details that seemed impossibly complex, and longer nights in her quarters, talking to the continuity about what the architects had intended. They were tired, the weapon told her during one of these late-night conversations. Tired of war, tired of conflict, tired of watching their children destroy each other. They built me hoping they'd never need to use me. But they also knew that hope alone wasn't enough. They needed teeth. And now we're the teeth, Mara said. Now you're the balance. The architects failed because they tried to control everything. You're succeeding because you're willing to share power, to admit you don't have all the answers. I don't feel like I'm succeeding. I feel like I'm one wrong word away from everything falling apart. Then you understand the position the architects were in. Power is easy. Responsible power is terrifying. The breakthrough came on day 17, when Sarah Chen made a discovery in the genetic data they'd recovered from the archive. Mara, you need to see this, Sarah said, bursting into one of the negotiation sessions with a complete disregard for diplomatic protocol. Sorry everyone, but this can't wait. She pulled up genetic sequences on the main display, samples from humans, from the remnant, from the collective, from all the seeded species. We've been thinking about this wrong, Sarah said, her voice trembling with excitement. We assumed the architects seeded different worlds with different genetic lineages, creating separate species that would evolve independently. But that's not what happened. She highlighted sections of code that matched across all the samples. They gave us all the same foundation. We're not different species. We're different expressions of the same genetic potential. Humans, remnant, even the collective. We're all siblings. Cousins, at least. The architects didn't just seed life across the galaxy. They created a family. The room fell silent as everyone processed this. A collective representative, geometric and cold. But now looking somehow uncertain, spoke first. You're saying we attacked our own relatives? We all did, Mara replied softly. We came here ready to fight each other over architect secrets, over this weapon, over who had the right to call themselves the true inheritors. But the truth is, we all are. The architects weren't playing favorites. They were hoping that eventually we'd figure out we were meant to work together. It was unity who broke first. Their collective consciousness reaching out with something that felt like shame and hope mixed together. Then perhaps we have been approaching this incorrectly. If we are family, the appropriate response is not competition, but cooperation. Took you long enough to figure that out, Mara said with a tired smile. The mood in the room shifted. Not to instant harmony. There was still too much history, too much pain for that. But to something possible. Something that looked like it might, with work and time and patience, become peace. The formal treaty was signed on day 21. It wasn't perfect. No treaty ever is. But it established Earth as a protected world, granted humanity time to develop without interference, and created a framework for sharing the archive discoveries with all seeded species. The continuity would remain on Earth, under human custody, but with oversight from a multi-species council, to ensure it was never abused. We're calling it the Architect Accord, General Webb told Mara as they stood on the rig's observation deck, watching the various fleets prepare to depart. It has a nice ring to it. It's not going to solve everything, Mara warned. There'll be violations, disagreements, maybe even conflicts. This is just the beginning. Yeah, but it's a beginning, Webb replied. That's more than we had a month ago. Silver approached them, her silver veins pulsing, and what Mara had learned was the remnant equivalent of a smile. We're departing tomorrow, she said, returning to our worlds to share what we've learned. But we'll leave representatives here if you'll have us. Cultural exchange, technology sharing, the basics of integration. We'd like that, Mara said. Though I gotta warn you, humans are messy. We're loud, we argue about everything, and we have a terrible tendency to complicate simple situations. So do the remnant, Silver replied. Perhaps that's why the architects made us family. After Silver left, Mara found herself alone on the deck, watching the sun set over the North Sea. The continuity sat in a secure case nearby, its power dormant for now, but ready if needed. You did well. Inheritor, it said in her mind. I got lucky, Mara replied. If any of the factions had called my bluff, it was not a bluff. You were prepared to use me if necessary. The others sensed that resolve, and it made your offer of peace credible. The architects understood this paradox, that lasting peace requires the capacity for violence, held in check by the will to seek alternatives. You know, Mara said thoughtfully, I never asked, what happens to you now? Do you just sit in storage until the next crisis? I remain. I watch. I wait. But I also learn. Your species has shown me something the architects never expected, that wisdom does not require age. That strength can be tempered with mercy, that the young sometimes see solutions the old have overlooked. So we passed your test? You exceeded it. The architects would be proud. Mara felt tears prick her eyes. I wish my dad could have seen this. He would have loved knowing he was right, that the stars really were trying to talk to us. Perhaps, the continuity said gently, in some way, he does know. The genetic memories that drove him toward this moment, they're still here, still part of the great web of consciousness that connects all architect descendants. His dreams live on in what you've accomplished. It was a nice thought, maybe even true. Mara let herself believe it just for a moment, before the practical demands of reality reasserted themselves. Her phone buzzed with a message from Tommy. News crews are calling. They want interviews about the woman who moved the moon. How do we handle this? Mara groaned. Right, she'd become famous. Probably couldn't walk down a street anywhere on Earth without being recognized now. That was going to take some getting used to. She typed back, tell them I'm not doing interviews. I'm just a scientist who got lucky. But if they want to talk to someone, point them toward the teams who've been studying the archive data. Those folks are doing the real work. Another message, this one from Sarah. Found something in the medical archive. Think we can cure about 40 major diseases with this tech. Also maybe extend human lifespan by a few decades. No big deal. Mara laughed despite herself. Yeah, she said aloud to the empty deck. No big deal. Just first contact, peace treaties, and curing death. Another Tuesday. Part 8. Integration. 6 months after the signing of the Architect Accord, Earth looked simultaneously familiar and alien. Remnant observers had taken up residence in a dozen major cities, their presence initially causing panic, but gradually becoming normalized. Kids pointed at them on the street. Tourists took selfies, and slowly, carefully, humans and aliens began the long process of learning to coexist. The technology exchange was both exhilarating and overwhelming. Archive data revealed advances in medicine, engineering, energy production, and 100 other fields. Scientists worked around the clock trying to understand discoveries that should have taken centuries to develop. But progress came with a price. Religious institutions struggled with the revelation that humanity was designed rather than divinely created. Economic systems buckled under the introduction of advanced technology that made entire industries obsolete overnight. And politically, the question of who spoke for Earth became increasingly complicated as nations jockeyed for position in the new galactic order. Mara watched it all unfold. From her new office at the International Archive Research Center, a facility built on the Nevada site where Silver had first landed, now transformed into a hub for human-alien cooperation. She'd been appointed director, a position she'd initially tried to refuse before being told in no uncertain terms that she'd saved the world and now had to help manage the consequences. Leadership is a bitch, she'd muttered, but she'd taken the job anyway. Today's crisis involved the Unity, who'd requested permission to establish a colony on Mars. On paper, it seemed reasonable. Mars was uninhabited, and having an alien presence in the solar system could facilitate ongoing cooperation. But there were concerns about what colony meant to a hive mind species that reproduced by incorporating other biological matter. They promised they'll only use sterile growth medium, Mara told the assembled committee. No incorporation of Earth-based life forms without explicit permission. And we trust them because, asked Ambassador Chen, Tommy's aunt as it turned out, and newly appointed to represent Earth in extraterrestrial affairs. Because the alternative is insulting a species that's been cooperative so far and risking the fragile peace we've built, Mara replied. Look, I'm not saying we approve this blindly. We set up monitoring stations. We establish protocols. We make damn sure they stick to the agreement. But we can't say we're all family and then treat them like the enemy the moment they ask for something. The debate continued for hours. But eventually the committee voted to approve the colony with strict oversight. It was a gamble, like everything else in this new reality. But gambling had worked so far. After the meeting, Mara retreated to the observation room where the continuity sat in its secure containment. She visited it daily, these conversations having become a strange form of therapy. "You're troubled," the weapon observed. "I'm exhausted," Mara corrected. "Everyone wants answers I don't have. Scientists want me to explain technology I barely understand. Politicians want me to make diplomatic decisions I'm not qualified for. And the media acts like I'm some kind of savior, when really I'm just making this up as I go." The architects felt the same way. They built civilizations, seeded worlds, shaped the course of galactic evolution, and they were never certain they were doing it right. Doubt is not weakness, Inheritor. It's wisdom. Wisdom feels a lot like failure from where I'm sitting. Then perhaps you need a reminder of what success looks like. The continuity pulsed, and suddenly Mara's mind was filled with images, not from the past, but from across Earth in the present moment. A hospital in Mumbai where doctors used archive medical technology to cure a child's leukemia, the parents weeping with joy. A classroom in São Paulo where human and remnant children learned mathematics together. The differences in their biology irrelevant to their shared curiosity. A research station in Antarctica where scientists from 6 different species worked side by side, translating archive knowledge into practical applications. A memorial in New York City where people gathered to honor those lost in the initial conflicts, both human and alien, united in grief and determination to build something better. "You see," the continuity said softly, "you doubt yourself because you see the problems, the conflicts, the 1,000 ways this could fail. But you forget to see the miracles happening every day because you dared to choose peace over power." Mara wiped tears from her eyes. "It's still so fragile. One mistake, one faction breaking the treaty and it all comes apart. Then don't make that mistake, and prepare for others who will. You carry me not as a weapon to be used, but as a reminder of what's at stake." The architects learned too late that power without wisdom leads to destruction. You learned it early enough to matter. The first real test of the accord came 8 months after. Signing. A radical faction within the collective, traditionalists who'd never accepted the treaty, attempted to seize control of their government. They argued that sharing architect secrets with primitives was a betrayal of everything the collective stood for. And they were prepared to use force to restore what they saw as the proper order. The coup nearly succeeded. For 3 days, the galaxy held its breath as collective ships loyal to different factions fought in orbit around their homeworld. And in the chaos, a strike force broke away heading for Earth. "We've got 12 hostile contacts on approach," General Webb reported, his face grim on the video feed. "ETA 4 hours. They're not responding to hails." Mara stood in the command center, the continuity's case open beside her, the sphere pulsing with anticipation of violence it was designed to deliver. "Recommendations?" she asked the assembled military and diplomatic personnel. "We defend," Webb said immediately. "We have defensive satellites now, remnant-enhanced fighters, and if necessary—" He glanced at the continuity. "No," Mara said firmly. "The moment we use the continuity in aggression, we become what we swore we wouldn't be. We defend, yes, but conventionally. And we reach out to our allies." "That's a hell of a gamble," Webb warned. "Everything about this situation is a gamble," Mara shot back. "But if we're going to survive as part of a galactic community, we need to trust that community to help us. Ambassador Chen, reach out to the remnant, the unity, the loyal collective forces. Tell them we have a common threat, and we need a unified response." The next 3 hours were a masterclass in high-speed diplomacy. The remnant responded immediately, dispatching a defensive fleet. The unity pledged support, their ships already repositioning. Even the hierarchs, still maintaining their skeptical distance, agreed to intercept the rogue collective forces. By the time the hostile ships reached Earth's orbital space, they found themselves facing not a lone human world, but a coordinated multi-species defense force. The battle was brief and decisive. Outgunned and outnumbered, the radical faction surrendered without firing a shot. "They're requesting asylum," Ambassador Chen reported, surprise evident in her voice. "The ship commanders are saying they were coerced, that they feared execution if they didn't participate in the coup. They want to defect. Mara looked at the sphere beside her, still pulsing with unused power. Then we grant asylum. We investigate their claims. We hold them accountable if they're lying, but we show them that the accord means something, that there's a path forward that doesn't end in destruction. It was a risk. Some of the commanders might be lying, might still be loyal to the radical faction, but it was also an opportunity to demonstrate that the new order offered something the old one never had: mercy. The collective government is asking to address the situation, another aide reported. Holographic image appeared, one of the geometric beings that had once threatened Earth, but this one looked different, less rigid, more organic somehow. I am Geometric Prime, newly elected to leadership of the collective, the being said. I come to apologize for the actions of the radical faction and to request Earth's continued cooperation under the Architect Accord. The coup has failed. Our society is undergoing significant reformation. We recognize now that the path forward lies not in isolation, but in collaboration. Mara stepped forward. Prime, we accept your apology, and we're prepared to help however we can. But I gotta be straight with you. Trust is earned, and the collective has some serious work to do to earn ours back. Understood. We are prepared to offer reparations, to increase transparency in our dealings, and to submit to oversight from neutral parties to ensure compliance with the accord. That's a good start, Mara said. Then, taking a deep breath, and as a gesture of good faith, Earth is willing to share additional archive medical data. I understand your species has been suffering from a genetic degradation that's been getting worse over the last millennium. We found something in the archive that might help. Geometric Prime's form rippled in what might have been shock. You would help us after we attempted to destroy you. That's what family does, Mara replied. We fight, we screw up, we hurt each other. But then we forgive, we move forward, and we try to be better. The architects gave us all the same gift, the potential to evolve, to grow, to become something greater than what we were. Seems to me like we should honor that gift by actually trying. Part 9, Evolution. 2 years after first contact, Earth had transformed in ways both visible and subtle. Cities now featured architecture that blended human and alien design principles, organic curves from the remnant, geometric precision from the collective, the flowing integration of the Unity's hive aesthetic. Spaceports dotted the globe, facilitating trade and travel between worlds, and in orbit, the International Space Station had been expanded into a true multi-species facility, a symbol of cooperation that could be seen from the ground on clear nights. But the changes went deeper than architecture. Human consciousness itself was evolving. The genetic memories that had been dormant for so long were fully active now, granting people access to knowledge that felt both foreign and familiar. Children were born with intuitive understanding of physics principles that took earlier generations years to learn. Artists created works that seemed to channel the aesthetic sensibilities of the architects themselves. And scientists made leaps of logic that seemed to come from nowhere but were actually the result of buried memories finally surfacing. Wasn't universal. Maybe 20% of the population showed strong effects, with the rest experiencing only mild intuitions. But it was enough to change humanity's trajectory forever. Mara watched these changes with a mixture of wonder and concern. The continuities tests had shown her the dangers of power without wisdom. She worried that humanity, given too much too fast, would stumble into disaster, despite everyone's best intentions. "You're doing it again," Tommy said, plopping down in the chair across from her desk. He'd finished his doctorate now, youngest person ever to earn a PhD in xenobiology, and served as Mara's deputy at the research center. "That thing where you worry about stuff that hasn't happened yet. It's called planning," Mara replied dryly. "You should try it sometime. I plan plenty. I just don't catastrophize every possible future." Tommy gestured at the reports scattered across her desk. "What's the crisis today?" Mara pulled up a file. "We've got a situation developing on the Mars Unity colony. They're reproducing faster than projected, and some Earth governments are getting nervous about having a rapidly expanding alien population in our solar system. Are they actually doing anything threatening, or are people just being xenophobic? That's the question, isn't it?" Mara rubbed her temples. The Unity insists they're just establishing their colony according to plan. But their definition of plan and ours might be different. They're a hive mind. They don't think about population the way we do. So we talk to them directly, ask them to slow down or explain their intentions better, already scheduled for tomorrow. But Tommy, at some point we're going to face a situation where good intentions aren't enough, where the differences between species are too fundamental to bridge. What do we do then? Tommy was quiet for a moment, then, we remember what you taught us. That being family doesn't mean we never fight. It means we keep trying even when it's hard. And if worst comes to worst, he glanced toward the secure vault where the continuity rested. We have a backup plan. That's what scares me, Mara admitted. Every time we rely on the continuity as insurance, we get a little more comfortable with the idea of using it. The architects built it thinking they'd never need it, but eventually they did. And look how that turned out. So we make sure we're better than they were, Tommy said with the confidence of youth. We learn from their mistakes. We stay humble. Mara smiled despite her concerns. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best, Tommy stood. Now come on, there's a reception tonight for the new Hierarch ambassador. You're the guest of honor, which means you can't skip it no matter how much you want to. Damn, Mara muttered, but she was already reaching for her jacket. The reception was held in what had once been the United Nations building, now expanded and retrofitted to accommodate representatives from dozens of species. Mara moved through the crowd, making small talk in 3 languages and 1 telepathic interface, feeling simultaneously at home and utterly out of place. Dr. Vance. The new Hierarch ambassador approached, a being that looked like living crystal, refracting light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. I wanted to thank you personally for your diplomatic efforts. The Hierarchs were reluctant to accept the accord initially. Your patience with our skepticism was appreciated. Just doing my job, Mara replied. Though I'll admit, you folks didn't make it easy. We are an old species, the ambassador said. Change comes slowly to us, but we are learning that age does not automatically confer wisdom. Your species, young as you are, has shown us new ways of thinking about cooperation and conflict resolution. They talked for a few more minutes before the ambassador moved on, leaving Mara to grab a drink from a passing waiter. She found a quiet corner and watched the crowd, humans and aliens mingling, translators humming, the future being negotiated one conversation at a time. Quite a sight, isn't it? Silver appeared beside her, moving with the fluid grace Mara had come to associate with the remnant. 2 years ago, most of these species wouldn't have shared a solar system. Now they're sharing appetizers. Progress, Mara agreed, though sometimes I wonder how sustainable it is. We're all on our best behavior right now. But what happens when the novelty wears off? When old grievances resurface, then we deal with them, Silver said simply. The architects made many mistakes, but they understood one truth, that unity isn't the absence of conflict. It's the decision to work through conflict rather than destroy each other over it. You've given us all a framework for that work. The rest is up to us to maintain. No pressure, Mara said wryly. Silver's laugh was like wind chimes. You carry the continuity, Mara. Pressure is your constant companion, but I notice you rarely complain about it. Complaining doesn't change anything. No, but it reminds us that we're all struggling with the same challenges, and there's comfort in that shared struggle. Silver paused. Then, I'm returning to the remnant homeworld next week. Our councils want a full report on Earth's integration, and I've been chosen to deliver it. I'm likely to be away for several months. Mara felt a pang of loss. Silver had become more than an ally over the past 2 years. She'd become a friend, one of the few beings who truly understood the weight Mara carried. You'll be missed. I'll return, Silver assured her. Earth has become something of a second home to me. Besides, I need to make sure you don't get into too much trouble without supervision. Me? Trouble? Mara grinned. I'm a model of diplomatic propriety. You moved the moon to make a point. That was a proportional response to the situation. They both laughed, and for a moment, the weight lifted. This was what the architects had hoped for. Mara thought, not perfect unity, not an end to all conflict, but moments like this where different species could share laughter and friendship despite their differences. Maybe, just maybe, they were going to make this work. Part 10. The next test. The crisis came from an unexpected direction. Earth itself began to change. It started subtly, unusual geological readings in the Pacific, electromagnetic anomalies that didn't match any known pattern. Scientists initially dismissed it as after effects of the continuity's activation, residual energy from the weapons demonstrations slowly dissipating. They were wrong. Mara. "You need to see this." Sarah burst into the command center at 3 a.m., her hair disheveled, her eyes wild. "The archive under the Pacific. It's not just a vault. It's alive." Mara, who'd been catching a quick nap on the office couch, jerked awake. "What do you mean alive?" "I mean it's a biological system or something like it. We've been studying the structure for 2 years, cataloging the technology, accessing the databases. But we missed the obvious. The whole thing is one massive organism, and we woke it up when you activated the continuity." Sarah pulled up scans that made Mara's blood run cold. The archive structure, which they'd measured at maybe 50 square miles, had grown. It now stretched across hundreds of miles of ocean floor, tendrils extending in all directions, connecting to geological features in patterns that looked almost like neural networks. "It's been growing this whole time," Sarah continued, "slowly enough that we didn't notice the change, but accelerating recently. And Mara, it's communicating. Communicating how? Through the planetary magnetic field, through tidal patterns, through seismic waves that form mathematical sequences. It's trying to talk to us, and we've been too focused on the archive contents to notice the archive itself." Mara immediately contacted the continuity. "Did you know about this?" "I suspected," the weapon replied. "The archives were not merely storage, they were seeds. The architects designed them to activate when enough descendant species had achieved consciousness and cooperation. You triggered that activation when you united the factions, and you didn't think to mention this. Would you have believed me? Would it have changed your actions?" Mara couldn't argue with that. "What does it want? What's it trying to say?" "I do not know. I am a weapon. It is something else entirely. You will need to ask it yourself." Over the next week, a team assembled to attempt communication with the archive organism. Linguists, mathematicians, biologists, and representatives from every major faction worked together to decode the E patterns. What they found was both beautiful and terrifying. The archive was a message, a living repository of not just information but consciousness. The architects hadn't simply stored their knowledge in databases. They'd encoded their minds, their memories, their very essence into biological systems that could survive for millions of years, and now those systems were waking up. "They're not dead," Mara whispered, staring at the decoded message. "The architects aren't gone, they're sleeping, and we just hit the snooze button." The implications were staggering. If the archives were waking, if the architects' consciousness was returning, what would they think of what their descendants had become? Would they be pleased with the cooperation achieved under the Accord? Or would they view it as a betrayal of their original designs? "We need to prepare for every possibility," Mara told the assembled council. "This could be the greatest discovery in galactic history, or it could be an existential threat." "We don't know which yet," the collective representative spoke. "What if the architects return and demand control? They created us. Do we owe them obedience?" "Hell no," Mara said flatly. "I don't care who created us. We're sentient beings with the right to self-determination. If the architects want to be part of our society, they're welcome. But they don't get to rule us just because they happen to mix our DNA a few million years ago." "Spoken like a true inheritor," Silver said approvingly. "The architects would respect that stance." "Yeah. Well, let's hope they get a chance to tell us that themselves." The first architect consciousness to fully wake was named Vesper. She appeared not as a physical being but as a projection, a hologram formed from light and magnetic fields, shaped into humanoid form, because that's what the gathered species could best relate to. She was beautiful in an alien way, her features perfect but somehow wrong, like an AI's attempt at humanity. "I greet you, children of our legacy," Vesper said, her voice echoing in minds rather than ears. "It has been long since we walked among the living. 3 million years by your reckoning, an eye blink in cosmic time, but an eternity for biological consciousness. Why did you leave?" Mara asked, stepping forward as humanity's representative. "Why seed worlds and then disappear?" "Because we failed." Vesper's expression was sad. "We sought to create a galaxy of peace, of cooperation, of species working together towards shared goals. Instead, we created competition, conflict, war. Our children fought each other, fought us, nearly destroyed everything we'd built. So we made a choice, to step back, to become observers rather than participants, to let our descendants find their own path without our interference. The continuity was your insurance policy, Mara realized. Yes, a weapon terrible enough to prevent total destruction, held in trust for descendants who proved worthy through their choices, rather than their lineage. You passed that test, Mara Vance. You held ultimate power and chose restraint. You faced extinction and chose diplomacy. The architects are pleased. Relief flooded through Mara. So you're not here to take over. We are here to advise, to share knowledge, to help where we can. But the galaxy belongs to you now. To humans, remnant, collective, unity, all the species we seeded and those who evolved independently. We had our chance to lead. We failed. Now it's your turn. Over the following months, more architect consciousnesses awakened. Each one brought knowledge, perspective, and a profound sense of hope that maybe, just maybe, their legacy would succeed where they had failed. They taught new sciences, revealed technologies that seemed like magic. They shared philosophies refined over billions of years of collective thought, and they watched with something like parental pride as their descendants took those gifts and built something new. But not all the architects were pleased with what they found. The dissenter called itself Terminus, and it woke angry. "You have squandered our gift," Terminus declared, its projection crackling with barely contained rage. "You take species barely past tribal warfare and grant them access to architect knowledge? You allow weapons like the continuity to remain in primitive hands. This is madness." "With respect," Mara said carefully, "we're not primitive. We're different from you, but that doesn't make us lesser. You are children playing with forces you cannot comprehend." The architects seeded this galaxy with a plan, a vision for how civilization should develop. You've abandoned that vision for this democratic chaos. "Yeah, we have," Mara shot back, her temper flaring. "Because your plan didn't work. It led to war, to the same conflicts you were trying to prevent. What we're building isn't perfect, but it's ours. We're making choices, making mistakes, learning from them. That's what sentient beings do." "Then you will repeat our mistakes," Terminus warned. "You will fight, destroy each other, and this time there will be no architects to rebuild from the ashes. I will not allow it." The projection vanished, but the threat remained. Part 11. Schism. Terminus wasn't alone in its dissatisfaction. Several other architect consciousnesses agreed that the current galactic order was too chaotic, too risky. They began working in secret, gathering resources, building towards some plan that none of them would share. "We've got a problem," General Webb reported during an emergency session. "Multiple archive sites are going offline. Not destroyed, sealed. The architect consciousnesses controlling them are refusing access." "How many sites?" Mara asked. "6 so far, all controlled by Terminus's faction. And they're not just sealing the archives, they're activating defense systems we didn't know existed. One research team that tried to investigate was nearly killed by automated weapons." Silver looked grim. "The architects are having their own civil war. Again, history really does repeat itself." "We need to talk to Vesper," Mara decided. "She seems reasonable. Maybe she can help us understand what Terminus is planning." Vesper met them in the Pacific Archive, her projection flickering with what might have been stress. "Terminus believes that the only way to prevent galactic catastrophe is to reassert architect control, to reshape the seeded species into what he thinks they should be." "Reshape how?" Mara demanded. "Genetic manipulation, forced evolution. Terminus has access to tools that can rewrite DNA on a planetary scale. He could transform entire species into what he considers the ideal form, obedient, peaceful, incapable of the conflicts that destroyed architect civilization." "That's genocide," Mara said flatly. "That's taking away everything that makes us who we are." "That is Terminus's perspective on salvation," Vesper replied sadly. "He does not see it as destruction but as perfection. And he is not entirely wrong. The species he would create would be incapable of war, of hate, of violence. They would live in perfect harmony." "They also wouldn't be alive," Silver interjected. "Not in any meaningful sense. They'd be biological robots, programmed for obedience. The remnant would rather die than accept that fate." "As would humans," Mara agreed. "Vesper, can you stop him?" No, Terminus has sealed himself in the Antarctic Archive, the largest and most fortified of all the sites. He's activated defense systems that even I cannot penetrate. And he's building something, a device that will allow him to broadcast his genetic restructuring across the entire galaxy simultaneously. The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications. Continuity, Tommy said quietly. We could use it to stop him. The continuity was built to prevent precisely this scenario, Vesper confirmed. An architect gone rogue, threatening to reshape reality according to their vision. You have the authority to activate it, Mara. Mara looked at the weapons case, feeling the weight of that decision settling on her shoulders once again. If I use the continuity against Terminus, I'd be destroying an architect consciousness, killing one of the beings who created all of us. To save billions of lives, Webb pointed out, sometimes there are no good choices, just less terrible ones. But that's exactly what Terminus is thinking, Mara argued. He believes he's saving the galaxy from itself, even if it means taking away our free will. If I destroy him to preserve our freedom, am I any better? Yes, Silver said firmly, because you're defending the right to choose, not forcing a choice on others. There's a difference, was there? Mara wasn't sure anymore. The line between protection and oppression seemed to get blurrier every time she examined it. How long do we have? She asked Vesper. Terminus's device will be complete in approximately 1 week. After that, he will activate it and every seeded species in this sector will be transformed. Then we have 1 week to find another way, Mara decided. Vesper, I need to talk to Terminus directly. Can you arrange that? He will not listen, maybe not, but I have to try, because the moment I decide that killing is the only solution, I prove him right about us being too primitive to handle architect power. The conversation with Terminus took place in virtual space, their consciousnesses meeting in a construct that looked like the interior of a vast library. You waste time, Terminus said without preamble. My course is set. Then humor me, Mara replied. Explain why you think destroying our free will is the right choice. Really explain it, not just, you're too primitive to understand. Terminus was silent for a moment, then gestured. The library dissolved, replaced by a vision of galactic war, billions dying, worlds burning, civilizations falling into darkness. This is what happened during the Architect War, Terminus said. This is what we risked when we allowed our creations to develop without guidance. And when I look at your accord, your careful balance of power, I see the same patterns forming. Different species with different goals, held together by fragile treaties that will dissolve the moment someone sees advantage in breaking them. You're probably right, Mara admitted. At some point the accord will be tested, maybe even broken. Species will fight, people will die. That's the cost of freedom, an unacceptable cost to you, but it's not your choice to make anymore. Mara stepped closer to the projection. Terminus, you're looking at us and seeing architects, beings with your power, your capabilities, your potential for destruction. But we're not you. We're learning from your mistakes. Yes, we'll make our own mistakes, but they'll be ours. And maybe, just maybe, we'll figure out solutions you never imagined, or you will destroy yourselves and take the galaxy with you. That's the risk of sentience. That's the price of consciousness. And it's a price every species has the right to pay or refuse on their own terms. Terminus showed her another vision, a galaxy transformed. Every species living in perfect harmony. No war, no conflict. No suffering. I can give you this, he said. Peace. True, lasting peace. All it costs is the chaos of self-determination. It was tempting. God, it was tempting. Mara saw humans in that vision, happy and healthy, living lives free from violence and hatred. She saw the remnant, the collective, all the species she'd come to know, existing in a paradise of Terminus's making. And she saw the emptiness behind their eyes, the absence of the spark that made consciousness worthwhile. No, she said firmly, we don't want your paradise. We want our mess, our beautiful, chaotic, terrifying mess, where we get to choose our own fates, even if we choose wrong sometimes. Then you choose extinction, Terminus said coldly. In 5 days I activate the device. If you wish to stop me, you will need to use the continuity to destroy me. And in doing so, you will prove that you are no different from the architects who tore the galaxy apart, willing to kill to enforce your vision of how things should be. The construct dissolved, dumping Mara back into her body with a gasp. Well, Webb asked, can you reason with him? No, Mara admitted. He's absolutely convinced he's right. And the worst part is I understand why he thinks that. So we use the continuity, Tommy said. We don't have a choice. There's always a choice, Mara replied. But she was running out of ideas for what that choice might be. Part 12. The Third Way. 3 days before Terminus's deadline, inspiration struck from an unexpected source, a unity, representative, a component of their hive mind that had been working with the archive research teams, made a discovery. In the biological databases, the genetic restructuring terminus plans, the unity explained, their collective voice harmonizing in a way that made human ears ache. It requires a broadcast mechanism to affect billions of beings simultaneously. But broadcast signals can be jammed, redirected, or modified. We don't have technology sophisticated enough to jam architect systems, Sarah objected. No, but the continuity does. Everyone turned to look at Mara, who was already ahead of them. You're saying we could use the continuity not to destroy Terminus but to block his signal, prevent the genetic restructuring from reaching its targets? More than that, the unity continued. We could modify the signal, turn it from a tool of oppression into one of enhancement. Give the seeded species a choice, accept Terminus's changes or remain as they are. Let each individual decide their own fate. It was brilliant. It was dangerous, and it just might work. There's a catch, Vesper said, appearing in the room with a flicker of light. To modify a signal of that power and complexity, someone would need to interface directly with both the continuity and Terminus's device. The mental strain would be extreme. How extreme? Mara asked, though she already knew the answer. It would likely be fatal. The human brain is not designed to process that much information simultaneously. But an architect brain is, Mara said. Vesper, you could do this. Yes, but I am the only architect consciousness currently active who has the technical knowledge and the will to oppose Terminus. If I sacrifice myself for this plan, there will be no one left to help guide humanity through what comes next. The room fell silent as everyone contemplated that cost. What if it wasn't just one person? Tommy asked suddenly. What if we distributed the load? Used multiple minds working in concert to handle the information flow? How would that even work? Sarah demanded. The genetic memories, Tommy said, excitement building in his voice. We've got thousands of humans who've awakened those memories, who carry fragments of architect knowledge. What if we linked them together, created a kind of human hive mind, temporary, just long enough to handle the interface? That's insane, Webb said. That's brilliant, Silver countered. The Remnant have similar memory-sharing capabilities. If we combined human genetic memory carriers with Remnant consciousness-sharing protocols, we might be able to create a network powerful enough to withstand the strain. Might, Mara emphasized. This is completely theoretical. So was First Contact until 2 years ago, Tommy pointed out. So was moving the moon. So was negotiating peace with species that wanted to destroy us. We're kind of good at making the theoretical real. Mara looked around the room, seeing hope and fear in equal measure on every face. This was it, another impossible choice, another moment where the fate of billions rested on decisions made in desperation. All right, she said. We try it. Vesper, can you design the consciousness network? Yes, but we'll need volunteers, humans and Remnant willing to risk their minds for this plan, and we'll need the continuity's cooperation. I am willing, the weapon said in Mara's mind. This is what I was built for, not destruction but protection. If we can save Terminus from himself, while preserving the free will of all seeded species, that is the architect's true legacy fulfilled. Then let's get to work, Mara said. We've got 3 days to pull off a miracle. The next 72 hours were a blur of frantic preparation. Volunteers were screened, humans who'd awakened strong genetic memories, Remnant who were skilled in consciousness sharing, even a few Unity components who offered their unique perspective on distributed intelligence. In the end, they had 43 individuals willing to risk everything. Mara was one of them, despite protests from Tommy and Sarah and pretty much everyone else. I'm not asking anyone to do something I won't do myself, she said firmly. Besides, I've already interfaced with the continuity. I know how it thinks, how it processes information. You need me in the network. If you die, Tommy said bluntly, who leads the human response to whatever comes next? You do, Mara replied. You've been learning this job for 2 years. Time to trust yourself, Tommy. The interface device was built in the Nevada facility, cobbling together human technology, remnant consciousness sharing arrays, Unity neural networking protocols, and archive systems that nobody fully understood. It looked like something from a nightmare, a central chamber surrounded by pods, each one connected to the others by cables that pulsed with bioelectric energy. This violates about 15 different safety protocols, Sarah muttered as she ran final checks. Add it to the list, Mara replied, settling into her pod. Around her, the other volunteers were doing the same, their faces set with determination and fear. Vesper's projection appeared in the center of the chamber. Once we begin, there's no stopping. The consciousness merge will last approximately 4 hours, the time needed to intercept Terminus's broadcast, modify it, and distribute it across the galaxy. During that time, your individual identities will be subsumed into the collective network. You will experience thoughts and memories that are not your own. Some of you may not survive the process mentally intact. We know the risks, Mara said. Let's do this. Mara, Silver's voice came from the observation deck. Thank you for everything you've done, everything you're about to do. The architects would be proud. Let's hope we're around to hear them say that, Mara replied. The system activated. For a moment, Mara felt nothing but the usual sensation of the pod's restraints. Then the consciousness merge hit. And suddenly she wasn't just herself anymore. She was Tommy, brilliant and terrified, trying to hold on to his sense of self while ancient memories flooded through him. She was a remnant warrior named Corvus, experiencing human emotions for the first time and marveling at their intensity. She was a unity component, tasting individuality and finding it both frightening and exhilarating. She was Vesper, ancient and wise, carrying the weight of 3 million years of regret and hope. She was all of them. And they were all her, a collective consciousness that was somehow more than the sum of its parts. Focus. Vesper's thought echoed through the network. Terminus's broadcast is beginning. We must intercept now. The network reached out with senses that transcended individual perception. They felt the Antarctic archive, felt Terminus's device powering up, felt the genetic restructuring signal beginning to propagate across space, and they reached out with the continuity's power to catch it. The strain was immediate and crushing. Information flooded the network. Genetic sequences for billions of beings, transformation protocols that would rewrite DNA on the fly, broadcast frequencies that touched every seeded world simultaneously. It was too much, too vast, too complex for any individual mind to handle. But they weren't individuals anymore. The network distributed the load, each consciousness handling a piece of the puzzle. Mara found herself working on human genetic sequences, modifying Terminus's changes to make them optional rather than mandatory. Tommy handled the collective codes, his mathematical genius translating alien genetics into something the network could process. The remnant warriors managed the broadcast frequencies, their warrior discipline keeping the signal stable, and through it all Vesper guided them, her ancient wisdom showing them how to take Terminus's tool of oppression and transform it into something else entirely, a gift of potential. The modified signal swept across the galaxy, touching every seeded species, every individual, offering them a choice: accept enhancement, genetic optimization, new capabilities, or remain as they were. Evolution by choice rather than compulsion. Mara felt billions of consciousnesses respond. Some accepted eagerly, welcoming the changes. Others refused, choosing their imperfections over Terminus's perfection. And that, she realized, was the point. Not the outcome, but the choice itself. Terminus is responding, Vesper warned. He's attempting to override our modifications. Through the network, Mara felt the architect's rage. He'd been so close to reshaping the galaxy into his vision of perfection. And now these primitives were ruining it, turning his salvation into heresy. Let me talk to him, Mara said, or thought, the distinction meaningless in the merged consciousness. She reached out to Terminus, their minds connecting across the vastness of the network. He was massive, ancient, powerful beyond human comprehension. But he was also alone, cut off from the other architects by his certainty, isolated by his conviction that he alone understood what was needed. "You can't force them to be perfect," Mara told him. "Perfection without choice is just imprisonment. They will destroy themselves." Terminus raged. "I have seen it happen. Will happen again unless someone stops them." "Maybe," Mara admitted, "but maybe not. Maybe we'll surprise you. Maybe we'll find solutions you never imagined, because we're different from you, think different from you, dream different from you. Dreams are not enough against chaos." "No, but they're a start. Through the network." Mara showed Terminus what she'd seen. Humans and aliens working together. The accord holding despite pressure. The small miracles of cooperation happening every day. "We're not perfect. We're messy and complicated and we screw up all the time. But we're trying. We're choosing to try. That has to count for something." For a long moment, Terminus was silent. "Then, and when you fail? When the conflicts resume and the wars begin? Then we'll deal with it," Mara replied. "Together. All of us, humans, remnant, collective, unity, even architects if you're willing to help instead of control. We're not asking you to abandon your concerns. We're asking you to trust that we can grow into something better if you give us the chance." The device in Antarctica powered down. Terminus's resistance faded. "I cannot promise to trust you," he said finally. "Millennia of evidence suggest I would be a fool to do so, but I can promise not to interfere, to watch, to hope that you prove me wrong. That's all we're asking," Mara said. The consciousness network began to dissolve, each individual pulling back into their own minds, carrying memories of what they'd experienced, but returning to themselves. Mara woke in her pod, gasping, every muscle aching like she'd run a marathon. Around her, the other volunteers were stirring, groaning, a few crying from the overwhelming experience. "Status report," she croaked. "Signal modified and distributed," Sarah reported from the observation deck, her voice thick with emotion. "Terminus's device is offline. We're receiving responses from across the galaxy, species acknowledging receipt of the choice. And so far, acceptance rates are running about 50-50, between enhancement and status quo." "Casualties?" Mara asked, dreading the answer. 3 volunteers didn't wake up. "Their minds. They're still in the network, merged beyond recovery. 2 humans, 1 remnant. We're keeping their bodies alive, hoping we can eventually separate them, but..." Mara closed her eyes against the grief. 3 lives sacrificed for billions. It was a bargain that made mathematical sense and moral tragedy in equal measure. "Honor them," she said quietly. "Make sure everyone knows what they did, what they gave up." Over the next hours, as the volunteers recovered and the full scope of what they'd accomplished became clear, messages started arriving from across the galaxy. The collective's government sent formal. "Thanks for stopping Terminus while preserving architect knowledge." The Unity expressed fascination with the temporary hive mind experience and requested more information about how it was achieved. The hierarchs acknowledged that perhaps humanity had earned their place after all. And from the Antarctic archive, Terminus himself sent a message. "I was wrong. Not about the risks. Those remain real, but about the solution. Free will is terrifying, but perhaps it is also necessary. I will watch. I will learn, and perhaps in time I will understand." "Not exactly a ringing endorsement," Tommy said, reading the message over Mara's shoulder. "It's a start," Mara replied. "For someone who's been convinced he was right for 3 million years, admitting he might be wrong is huge.